this unbelievable and final class of this series of living in the time of the coronavirus, how Judaism can help us through. And I just wanted to say a word. I selected this topic a long time ago, that the final class would be about how the virus has changed us as a community, like how it's caused us to redefine community or pushed us along a path that perhaps we had already begun to tread on, what kind of changes we might see in the future, or perhaps things we might want to hold on to that have transpired during the virus that are actually good things that we might want to make commitments toward in the future. And then, of course, George Floyd was brutally murdered and the country went up in flames. And it has been, I know for many of you have reached out to me, it has been extraordinarily disturbing, upsetting, disorienting, for some angering, for others disillusioning. I mean, it's just been a really difficult time for our nation. And of course, the responses of different leaders, etc., has also been, I think, in some ways disappointing. So I thought, well, maybe we ought to use this time to talk about that. And then I realized what led to the murder of George Floyd and what led to not really only nationwide protests, but literally worldwide protests in solidarity all over the world, and I know in Israel they had massive protests, really were a systemic racism that probably has been going on since the first slaves were brought here 400 years ago. So some of the changes that we might hope to see from the virus actually head on address some of those issues. So I realized that that the topics are not mutually exclusive, that they're very much interrelated. And so I want to go ahead with this topic, and we'll see, I'll point out as we go through just how some of the issues that are raised will also lead us toward the first steps in solutions for our society, not just that's struggling with the virus, but struggling with the disease of racism today too. And we know there are other diseases as well, including anti-Semitism, but for today, I think we'll just stay at racism. So I am going to share the screen. Let's see, here we go. Okie dokie, I think you can all see. All right, so the first, I always start with something that I think is more accessible, which is a personal account. But I think this section, more love, more compassion, more social consciousness, we could even add more self-awareness, right? More cognizance of our responsibility in the status quo. Even if we haven't done anything, the fact that we aren't doing anything is part of the problem. So let's just look here. In this dark time, I've had, this is a woman who she and her family all got the coronavirus. So I cut that part out, but the link is always at the bottom, the citation, so you can look at the beginning if you want later. In this dark time, I've had ample opportunity to see the best in people, to be reminded that redemption and salvation are a collective effort. When my family was at its sickest, our neighbors went grocery shopping for us, brought us cough syrup, the last bottle in the drugstore, and sent delivery meals from local restaurants. Midway through making my matzah toffee, because this was right before Pesach, I realized that I had only 1/3 of a cup of brown sugar and the recipe called for a full cup. I sent a query to my building's mailing list. Replies flew. One person wanted to run out and shop for me. Two more offered to hang a bag of sugar from their doorknobs for me to pick up. When Jonathan, her husband, felt better, he started cleaning out the garden shed. He's a man of action. He found a box of the rarest treasure, N95 masks, left over from a neighbor's construction project. My brother-in-law is a pediatrician who works at a hospital in the Bronx. I called him asking if I could send them to him. I don't want you going to the post office, he said. Give them to the hospital nearest you. But how? Should I just waltz in? I didn't know, and I didn't want to waste anyone's time or energy that could be expended on patient care or self-care, so I asked on social media. I immediately heard back from a local photographer, Stacy Joy. We'd met in person only once, but we'd gotten to know each other's work through our mutual love of our neighborhood vlog, EV Grieve. I don't know. Stacy, it turns out, was working with a team delivering meals to local hospitals, morgues, firehouses, paramedics, and EMTs. She offered to come pick up the masks and donate them on the next day's run. I gave her my address. I'm going to wear my new llama mask over to see you, she texted. Is that okay? Or would you prefer I wear my N95? Of course I voted llama mask. I've already had the virus. Plus, llama mask? Not only did Stacy act as though I were the one doing her a favor, she brought me a peanut butter cupcake. The next day, Stacy texted that she tried both NYU, Langone, and Bellevue, but neither hospital could take the masks. Perhaps because 3M Cool Flow respirator N95 masks aren't medical grade. Perhaps also because the box was open. Instead, she gave them to the fire battalion that came to the hospital at 7 p.m. to join in the clapping for the hospital workers. Apparently, every night at 7 p.m., everybody claps for the hospital workers. Was I okay with that? Absolutely. Whew, she texted back. I wasn't sure. They were very grateful. The lieutenant was especially thrilled. She texted me photos of the beaming firefighters, lieutenant included, holding their new masks. Do you know the phrase mitzvah goreret mitzvah? It's a saying from Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Fathers. One good deed brings another good deed. Kindnesses inspire more kindnesses. Down here on the ground, we see rainbows drawn in sidewalk chalk by little kids, COVID-19 era symbols of hope. And for some of us, reminders of a covenant that the world will not be destroyed again. And at 7 p.m. every night, we clap. Virus transmission rates aren't the only things that are exponential. So another very, very beautiful sharing. And the article is called Virus Transmissions Are Not the Only Things That Are Exponential. By Marjorie Engel. Oh no, I'm sorry. It's called On Recovery and Rainbows. There is no bright side to COVID-19, but there are moments of beauty and hope amid the terror. So is Marjorie Engel's experience, in her experience, what has been the effect of COVID-19 on her family and community? It's pretty clear, right? That they've all come together, and it's an extended community. I mean, it's her building community, it's her social media community, it's whatever, right? That when she's reached out for help, people have been there and grateful to receive help as well. So in what ways have we seen mitzvah goreret mitzvah realized in our own OST community or in your own lives? Right, they applaud, so Ellen Fullen is writing, this is, I assume, in the hospitals, they applaud, bang pots and pans, instruments, and anything to make noise every night. I think that's lovely, every night. Generosity and caring for others. Yes, and in our own community, and I mean, Dorian's online, she could, Ellen lives in New York City, okay. Dorian could talk much more on this, but we have seen massive outpouring of support for any initiatives that we have created at Temple to help others, either frontline hospital workers or people who are hungry at the local food banks. Now we will be launching through the Love Thy Neighbor program a whole new card writing effort. I think it's called A Little Bit of Sunshine, I think is what it's called. Dorianne, write in the chat if I'm wrong, but I think it's called A Little Bit of Sunshine. Anyway, which all of us will have the capacity to create these cards in through a very simple computer program that just takes a couple, clicks. And I haven't tried it yet, but I promise you, if I can do it, you can do it for sure, for sure. Have any of you seen Share Some Sunshine? Thank you, Dorianne. Share Some Sunshine. That's a kind of a tongue twister, like she sells seashells by the seashore. And in what ways have you seen one kindness leads to another in your own lives? Well, as you think about it, you'll add that to the chat as well. So here's the big question. Do you think that this will last post COVID-19, whatever that is, or at least for the duration of COVID-19? In other words, one of the things that I always think about is what transforms a moment into a movement? In other words, if George Floyd's death leads to protests and vigils, etc., for a few weeks and nothing changes systemically, then that moment will have been lost, And it's the same thing. If we've seen people have a recognition for what it means to be a community, and how important relationships are, and how clearly we see that when we are deprived of hugs and kisses. And, last week I told y'all I had 4 funerals. And if you think it's hard to go to the cemetery with the immediate mourners only and not to be able to touch them, not, just to be able to offer condolences from 6 feet away, it's very, very hard. Yes, Shelley Loeb is saying people calling to check in on each other. Absolutely. And Vivian saying she certainly hopes so. People don't march and protest anti-Semitism. They do. We do march and protest anti-Semitism. But again, it's at moments that have not become movements. That's the thing. Again, we protest at the moment. We didn't really protest. I mean, when the Tree of Life synagogue shooting happened, we had prayer vigils, and we hosted a service of healing at Sholom, and it was attended by 500 people, 250 of which were not even Jewish. They were our neighbors standing in solidarity with us. So we do stand up, Shelley, when something happens. But the question is, does that catalyze us to move, to take it forward from there? I'd love to have another Sledge and Learn on how we can make a moment into a movement. Great. Lots of mutual lending, borrowing, giving going on in our neighborhood. Yes, we know our neighbors more each day. I believe because of the duration of time that this has happened, whether COVID or protesting, impression is embedded. God willing, Joyce. Yes, Jews were a huge presence in the anti-Klan protests. Yes, that's true. And there have been some other longer statements here. If history repeats itself, this effect will last in the generations that experience the crisis. However, the policy changes may be permanent. For example, the development of health insurance after the 1918 Spanish flu epidemic. We can only hope. It's the same, Marcia says it may be the same as after the mass shooting. People care for a bit and then there's another shooting. But we, on the other hand, we have making masks and sharing. Tom and Elizabeth say it's distressing to them to be the only old people showing up at the Norfolk protests. Yes, it made a huge difference to have protests in terms of ending the Vietnam War. pre-protesting the Bush wars, walking in Selma, where are the Jews now? Well, we are just now, well, we did have over the weekend clear, but we are just now, well, actually, I didn't put it out to the congregation. I just sent something to Hub about two in Norfolk, one tonight and one Friday at noon that I'm actually taking part in an interfaith prayer vigil. I'll send those out to the congregation, or I'll put them on my Facebook page too. Andrea Klein, good to see you, Andrea. She says so many young people are coming out and it is spreading. That's the potential for change, just God willing. If people heed them, I mean, it's so hard. I keep thinking of the Parkland shooting at the high school and how these children, literally children, high school children, you know, did walkouts and took buses to the Florida legislature and spoke and picketed and et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, the laws did not change. What changed the gun laws in Virginia is an all Democratic legislature and a Democratic governor, you know, Northam, that he's the one that's put in. And there have been a lot of protests because of that from gun rights advocates, to say it in a non-derogatory way. We've begun now to ensure that the elections in November happen and that we make changes in the Senate and the White House. That's right. And as soon as the potential for mail-in ballots as soon as that information goes out, we will share all of that as well. Yes, Cantor Jen's sermon on Friday night was extraordinarily powerful. And yes, Barack Obama wrote a great piece on how to change the moment into the movement. Seems like we need another lunch and learn. What do y'all think? Okay, moving along. So speaking of this, actually, I loved Cantor's sermon from Friday night, but this one I loved also. This was the one from Moore a few weeks ago. I only put part of it. But remember, she started with the midrash of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who was wanted by the Roman emperor, and there was a death, a death threat on his head, whatever it is. So he spent 12 years with his son in a cave. And remember, they come to tell him that the emperor's dead and it's safe to come out, and he's still so filled with rage that every time he sees anything and he looks upon it, like fire comes forth from his eyes and everything burns up. So, he goes back in the cave for another year, and then finally, after some contemplation, comes out. So Cantor's point was, will we be transformed, or will we transform ourselves when we come out of the cave? Yes, some steps were taken after Parkland, like Walmart stopped selling guns and Dick's Sporting Goods did. And yes, Trevor Noah posted an amazing piece. Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, and we should, Liz, make some notes on that President Obama's piece and Trevor Noah's piece, and we'll collect those all up for a future discussion as well. Okay, so Bar Yochai spent 12 years in isolation, and yet upon emerging for the first time, his perspective had not changed. Surely he had experienced much of what we are experiencing now in that time: loneliness, deprivation, lack of connection, and fear. And yet those things did not change him. It wasn't until God sent him back to do the work of self-reflection that he was able to move forward with a sense of peace and become a conduit of peace in the world. See, all of these changes require that we first look at ourselves. That's always the beginning. Perhaps this tale is recounted in the Talmud just for this moment, when one day, hopefully very soon, we are able to emerge. We have the opportunity to move forward into our own lives with new perspectives, new wisdom, and new behaviors. Since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, greenhouse gas emissions have been dropping worldwide. So she writes about how it's dropped 25% in China, and we're on the same trajectory. And then if you look at while we would not have traded the hundreds of thousands of lives lost to this pandemic, well, so far it's over 100,000, but I guess worldwide it's hundreds of thousands. The side effect of the heartbreak is this opportunity to proceed in a different way, doing the hard work of protecting the environment that we as a species have taken for granted. When this pandemic passes, how will we modify? You need to mute everybody, honey. When this pandemic passes, how will we modify our practices to hold on to some of the environmental progress that we have made? Are we ready to emerge changed? We really need to think about that. You know, how many of us are, you know, willing to change maybe where we shop, you know, where we go so that we can walk or ride bicycles or whatever, you know, so that we use our cars less, basically. To continue to reduce that carbon footprint. She also talks about how the COVID-19 epidemic has made it hard to get many of the creature comforts we're used to. Toilet paper is a coveted treasure. She's down to 4 rolls of paper towels, and that's panic-inducing. So we can't just run to the store for non-essential items or easily update our wardrobes or impulse buy that new gadget. While weeks ago, when the thought of something new to buy crossed our mind, I could have it in hand within minutes or at least within a day. You know, today those purchases take more planning. We have to ask ourselves, do I need it or do I just want it? We're becoming more industrious, finding alternative ways to accomplish the tasks for which before the pandemic we could have purchased a solution. Scarcity, along with the closing of many stores, has gifted us with time and space for more careful consideration of our consumption. Will we be able to take this as a lesson when commerce opens back up? Are we ready to remain changed? In other words, again, you know, and this requires each of us to answer the questions. Liz had Joe Biden's talk yesterday. This requires us to answer the questions, you know, do I really need it? You know, because the net effect of all of the consumption, of course, is not only the cost of making it and delivering it, et cetera, but it's also, you know, more stuff in our landfills. And I've talked about stuff before, right? When I did the George Carlin piece in one of our classes about how we, you know, our houses, we only have houses for our stuff. And when we have too much stuff, we get bigger houses, et cetera, et cetera. So, and then she talked about how she stepped out on her balcony and hadn't seen like a human being in a really long time. And she saw the neighbor. As I recounted last week, I stepped out onto my balcony one day recently to find my neighbor watering her plants. While we always said hello, we never really talked much before, and I'd never given her much thought. This time was different. She lives alone, as do I, and neither of us had seen another human being in the flesh for days. I wanted to dive over the railing and hug her. I spent a half an hour talking with her, connecting with her in a way in the 3 years she has been my next door neighbor we never have before. Now I often step out onto the balcony hoping she will be there. Whether we are sheltering with our families or alone, I'm sure that each of us miss the day-to-day interactions with those around us. I deeply miss seeing each of you in the halls of temple or smiling at me from the pews of the chapel. I echo that. On that blessed day when we can gather once again, how can we express this newfound gratitude for each other? How can we prioritize our relationships? Are we ready to emerge change? Right, exactly. So let's see what else we have here. Corporations need to change and commit to environmentalism, yes. And many, many, many corporations now have whole departments, and I can't remember exactly what they're called, but they're basically about social consciousness. They have young employees who help them with all of these kinds of issues, not only with how they can be better citizens of the planet in terms of environmentally conscious, but they also, in terms of social causes. Like I'm sure you all know, like Tom's footwear or boba socks. You know, you buy a pair of shoes and they give a pair of shoes. You buy a pair of socks and they give a pair of socks. By the way, it's Bombas, not Bobas. By the way, they have donated tons of socks to our soup kitchen, like hundreds and hundreds of pairs, just because someone reached out and asked them, not somebody who has anything to do with Bombas. You know, a retired professor of psychology, Robin Schoner, just a regular member of our congregation, you know, just reached out. I don't know if she wrote a letter or an email, I don't know what, but you know, and there they were. So Paul Turkletop writes, one thing I've seen as a huge positive from the pandemic is that families are spending more time together. Amen to that. Riding the bike to see full families on bike rides, walking together, exercising together. I've seen many people have said, Harriet Bloom shared in a recent virtual oneg of ours that now her family lights Shabbat candles and makes Kiddush together for 15 minutes every Friday night, you know, from all over the country, wherever they are, and what a blessing that's been. And I just heard from Barb Gelb, somebody else in our congregation last night, that every Friday evening they do like a virtual Kabbalat Shabbat, you know, just a way of checking in. Which is wonderful. This is something that's happening because parents are not working or working from home. Either way, it's so nice to see how some families have been able to use this time to get closer together. Thank you, Diane. Yes, we will take less for granted, God willing. Again, we want to think about how we make this moment into a movement, you know. Less coal was used than renewable energy this year for the first time. Bombas Socks donated 3,000 pairs this year, and it'll be an annual gift to us. Thank you, Dorian, for correcting me in the hundreds. That is beautiful. I attend Friday and Saturday services more often when online. Yes. And Sheila says the same thing. And actually, that has been true of many, many people. Truly, we see people on there, you know, at our services who really never come in person. You know, I will not be mentioning names, but you know what I'm saying. So it has made it very accessible. And of course, we're going to get to synagogue during this lunch and learn as well, and changes there. But it does not seem to me we'll ever be going back. Meaning, of course, there will come a time when we are back together in the building, for sure, particularly worshiping together. But we will at the same time be live streaming our services so that there will be this opportunity to touch more souls, you know, more Jewish souls, has been such a blessing. I mean, people are finding comfort when they didn't even think about looking here for it. You know what I mean? So it's just, it's, you know, I think forevermore we'll be seeing both and not only one or the other. You know what I mean? A lot of people are saying that they attend services because it's much easier. You can have your morning coffee, you know. Thank you, James, finding comfort from being together for these learning sessions, even from being with me, which is nice. I told the crisis management team the other night that it's strange, but that y'all seem to still be hanging in, so you aren't sick of me yet. So that's a good thing. Anyway, moving back to Cantor Jen, to my incredibly old soul wise, our amazing Cantor. She writes, as a synagogue community, it's been necessary to completely reinvent nearly every facet of how we pray and congregate. Without our beautiful building as a gathering point, we have to rethink, redesign, and rework every holiday celebration, every funeral and life cycle event, every moment of Torah learning that we offer. It's so true. And we had to do it like instantaneously, right? We closed the building Thursday night, March 12th, which was like 3 days after Purim. Purim was, never sick of you, thank you, Joy, which was 4 days after Purim. Oh no, Purim was at like I think Purim was Monday night, Tuesday, if I'm not correct. And Thursday evening, we had to close the building. Purim was like the last time we were able to gather together. We didn't do online services Friday and Saturday that Shabbat because we really didn't even know how to do it, you know. But But by the following week, 8 days later, we were up and running. And it may not have been perfect, but we managed somehow, you know. So she says the challenges have been at times overwhelming. Yes, a lot on her because she figured out a lot of the technology. And I have news for you, you know, she does it with Dr. Google. You know, it's trial and error. It's not like, you know what I mean? It's not like she just knows. She just knows how to look. And yet we are doing it. See, this is the thing. Over 160 devices signed on to our Passover Seder, many with whole families gathered around. This is certainly more people than we could have packed into Kaufman Hall. And then she says this series has been attended by over 100 people sometimes. You know, we've had anywhere from 41 to 80 some devices on at a time. But we have, I think, 110 or 111 devices registered. So it's not always the same people. Many who would not have been able to leave work or their kids to study in person. Our Shabbat services are being enjoyed by thousands from all over the world, many live and many more at their convenience later. You know, some people can't get to it by 6:30, but at 7:30 they sit down and watch it, you know, and you can do it anytime. We're finding opportunities to connect with some of the best Jewish musicians through our Shirei Tikva quarantine series. The next one is this Thursday night. You don't want to miss Noah Aronson. He's really amazing. And on June 1st, we will welcome, this was Monday night, Talia Karner, the book, The Third Daughter, and that also had 40 some devices on it. So I hope those of you who read the book, etc., you know, et cetera. And people are saying they're grateful for all of these programs, services, the changes that the staff and clergy have put into place so that we can connect and be together. And, you know, if I couldn't be with you, literally, Canner and I are on the thing, have been 5 days a week, from Tuesday through Saturday. So only Sunday and Monday, one of us hasn't been on. I would be so bereft, I wouldn't know what to do. You know what I mean? It would be just awful to not have, you know, to not have this time together. So she writes, our Ohef Sholom friends group has joined into a thriving place for conversation. Yes, you cannot post on the Ohef Sholom Temple page. You can respond to a post, but the Ohef Sholom Friends page, you can write to each other. And Marcia Moody's brilliant at that. She'll say, you know, show us pictures of you in your face masks, you know, or whatever. And we'll, you know, everybody's kind of, or sharing, you know, what have we been doing for this or that. So it's a nice way to talk to each other. That was Linda Fox Jarvis, our membership chair, just stepped down after an amazing year, was responsible for that, along with this Third Daughter program. Desperation has led us to innovation. Claire said, necessity is the mother of invention. While we long to congregate, we are finding countless ways to broaden our definition of being in community together. How will we hold on to this spirit of inventiveness? How will we continue to connect with those who are newly engaging with us in this digital world? How are we ready to emerge change? So I just want to stop, you know, there. And so one big discussion that's been happening in the Rabbi's thread is, and it's sort of dovetailed with the whole discussion of how up until Shavuot, which was this past Thursday night, Friday, we, you know, we were counting the Omer, the barley harvest, between the second night of Passover and Shavuot, the festival of Shavuot, which commemorates the giving of the Torah, but both are harvest holidays as well, when our ancestors brought their first fruits of those two harvests, spring and late spring harvests, to the temple in Jerusalem to offer to God. We count in between. And so one of the discussions that's been happening is the difference between counting members and counting souls touched. And you know, if we want to start thinking in terms of counting souls touched, how do we sustain ourselves? You know, because that's one of the big questions that comes up in a minute in the next one I'm going to show you in a second. Okay, so she says, we don't know yet when we continue, when we can stop counting the seamlessly ending days of isolation, although we're starting to take baby steps toward a new reality, maybe it's a way for us to reimagine the way forward. How will we translate our time in this cave of isolation into a gentler, more thoughtful way of being? Which new habits and behaviors are worth keeping, and what will we let go of? When we are finally able to celebrate the Havdalah we long for, that will separate us from this unthinkably lonely time. And the Havdalah set is sitting, I don't know if you can see it, probably not, it's on the other side of the Shabbat candles, waiting for that day when we can make Havdalah together. May we emerge as Bar Yochai finally did. May we be wiser, may we be strengthened, may we be changed. Amen. Okay, and we've answered these questions sort of as we went on. Okay, the Jewish world. This is from the guy who's like the associate director of like some World Jewish Congress or something like that. So we don't have time to read the entire thing. It's a very long article, but I have underlined important parts. So we're going to read the first 4 paragraphs, and then we're just going to run through some of the other changes in the Jewish world or challenges that have been brought by the virus, and look, at how we might address or meet some of those challenges. So while the COVID-19 pandemic is far from over, Jewish leaders around the world are already thinking about the morning after. And believe me, we're thinking about that at Temple every day. In doing so, they need to contend not only with the devastation wrought by the coronavirus that the entire world has had to face, but also with a set of enormous internal challenges uniquely our own. So he suggests 3. Gathering is at the heart of Jewish life. Essential to the fulfillment of Jewish commandments, the expression of Jewish values, and the continuity of the Jewish collective. Social distancing, of course, is the antithesis of gathering, right? And the prolonged period of lockdown has threatened the vitality and cohesion of Jewish communities. And this is something that we worry about all the time, right? How can we gather safely? When can we gather safely? What will we need to do to make it safe to gather? How many can gather? What age can gather? We have been dealing with so many questions, particularly right now around the high holidays. Like, how can we best serve our congregation meaningfully, spiritually, fulfillingly, and safely? These are very hard, very, very hard questions to work through, because the information is contradictory. I'll just give you a small, for example. You can have up to half of the maximum capacity. So the maximum capacity of the sanctuary is 600, so you can have 300. But everyone has to be 6 feet apart. So in all directions. So Linda Peck and staff went through and literally marked. Well, when you mark, you go from 300 to maybe 125, okay? Can you only let in people who are under 60 and have no mitigating circumstances? Because everyone's 60 and over or with, mitigating circumstances is vulnerable. Do you do it on a lottery? How do you do it? How do you do it? One Shabbat at a time to figure it out exactly. Thank you, Claire. Singing is deadly. It carries the virus like coughing and sneezing. Every time a choir gets together and sings, they all come down with the virus. You know what I mean? There are synagogues looking into building like plexiglass barriers, around their clergy. What kind of a meshigas? Everyone would have to be in a mask. Everyone. The clergy, Chuck, and every person in attendance. When you think about it, it's like we might be able to figure out a way to do it, but it's gonna be pretty dystopian for a while. It's not going to look or feel like anything we know. The whole thing has just been really hard. Okay, next. The institutions and infrastructures that facilitate Jewish gathering are dependent on the support of their constituencies and generous benefactors. But everybody's suffering financially. And we've seen even some of our most generous benefactors, really generous for generations, are struggling and having to pull back. So we look at our budget for next year and we estimate, well, what happens if it gets cut by 10%? What happens if it gets cut by 20%, 30%, 40%? You know what I mean? All the way to 75%. We just don't know. Nobody knows, someone saying the Ted Constant Center or Harbor Park. Matt, yeah, if we could find someone to underwrite that, that would be outstanding. Although I will tell you, and I'm not ashamed to say this, I have never in 24 plus years, because I started my 25th year in the rabbinate, not counting school. That was another 5 years. So this is almost 30 years of this. I have never served a congregation that did not do double services on the high holidays. Never. I don't know what it's like. 3 years as an intern at Westchester Reform Congregation in Scarsdale, double services. 9 years as an associate rabbi at Baltimore Hebrew Congregation in Baltimore, double services. 15 years at Sholom, double services. When I first came here, after 12 years of doing double services, I said, can we look into renting a big space so we can all be together? And for God's sakes, I don't have to do double services. Or can we solicit someone for $3 million to build a balcony like United Methodist Church has so we can all worship together? And the answer was no. People want to be in our sanctuary. So yeah, I would love to rent Harbor Park, but that definitely will not feel like our sanctuary, Matt. And we would still have to have everybody in masks, etc. But it would give us more space for sure. This will not last forever. For sure it will not. God willing, there will be a vaccine. Dr. Fauci is, intimating that it may be sooner that than we think. We will reunite without a doubt. We're just talking about the immediate aftermath. We have to get through the immediate aftermath to get through, I don't know why I'm sniffling, to get to the, right? And so he says that each of these three situations alone is enough for a Jewish community to contend with, right? How to gather, how to sustain ourselves financially. Oh, I forgot the third one. I'm sorry. Israel is a vital element of Jewish identity, but the whole Israel experience has been gutted. You can't go there. You can't go to summer in Israel programs. Kids can't go. There are no trips to Israel. Do you know what I'm saying? So he's saying all three of these. And then, of course, Shelley, you had mentioned earlier that these three are like the internal threat to the Jewish community. The external threat is anti-Semitism, which is likely to increase as the death toll climbs, exemplified by the Oxford University survey released this week. It's not this week, it's a few weeks ago. The date is below. That 20% of Britons believe Jews created the coronavirus for financial gain. I never thought I'd say this, but that's like the dumbest dumb I've ever heard in my life. Okay, so anyway, he went to different communities all around the world. Repeat that, Rabbi. Yes, the 2021 Hineni, sorry, I'm laughing out loud. I think it's Karen Fine writing, and maybe Matt, though, that Harbor Park is a holy space. Just ask my husband, who's a baseball mashugana. Absolutely. And the fact that it's a Baltimore Orioles farm team that plays there, it's a AAA team, makes it super holy, Yeah, the Hineni trip may be postponed. I'm sorry, Nina. Repeat that. Yes, 20% of Britons believe that Jews created the coronavirus for financial gain. Is that what y'all are saying? What about? Who thinks that Jews have 20% of Britons, people who live in Great Britain, who we think they have schools there, so you think that they would know. Oh my God, yes. And you may not remember this, but a while back, before, like at the very beginning of the virus, I gave a sermon about anti-Semitism and how there were all of these writings on the dark web about how Jews are responsible for the virus. I don't know if any of you heard it, but I'm sure some of you were there because like the 2Js are on and they are always at services in the choir. You know what I mean? So there are people, I'm sure, who heard it, but I read some things that were like mind-blowing. Okay, so here are some of the things that this gentleman found out. In Ethiopia, They're dealing with issues of sanitation, nutrition, and healthcare. This is the Ethiopian Jewish community. These are all Jewish communities. In Australia, the economic impact, citing the decline in discretionary funds, etc. So they're worried about economic viability. In Argentina, worrying about economic collapse of the essential organizations and infrastructures. In Poland, keeping people engaged digitally, but even a higher priority is taking care of the homebound and elderly to whom the community is delivering meals regularly. In Spain, in the Jewish community, the main challenge is to confront the emotional and social situation of our members. In Hungary, we must deal more with souls instead of stones. But providing any service at all is not going to be easy. One federation lost a third of its income due to the shutdown of tourism here. That was in Hungary. And then he goes on to remarkable responses. So we talked about how the Jewish community has been able to reinvent itself many times before, and how there's an increased appreciation for the value of all Jews being responsible for one another. And I would add, not only all Jews being responsible for one another, but all humans being responsible for one another, right? All humans being responsible for another. Jane saying, watch the viral documentary on PBS. Yes. The solidarity we feel for each other and the embrace we feel for the entire Jewish world, especially Israel. The lesson to be learned from this, and these are, again, each one is a different group. Like this is the gentleman who runs the federation in India. The lesson to be learned from this experience is to recognize our mortality and focus on the important things in life. Like he expects change for the better. This is, again, down under. Is down under New Zealand or Australia? Down under. The amazing success on the part of the community is maintaining connections and a sense of belonging. Amen to that. Now they have sent, Bulgaria. Bulgaria, are you here, Prue? These are the Jews of Bulgaria. Prue spent not like 9 months in Bulgaria teaching English. Concern over the emotional state of the community's isolated elderly led to providing special services. Virtual Israel Independence Day celebration in Poland, a commemoration of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising that saw 3,000 attendees and has produced 30 digital bedtime stories for children. Well, Canner Jen's not up to 30, but she's getting there. The Oxford survey Prue is writing is in the Jerusalem Post, and details indicate that 2,500 people were presented with conspiracy theories and 2.4% agree, a less alarming number. Thank you. 2.4 is not 20%, so that's helpful. Thank you, Prue. This is South Africa, caring for the poor outside its doors. It's wonderful, she says, not only the concern for the Jewish community, but the concern for the entire population of the country. And I would say, amen to that, to Dorianne and to Carol Brum and to the Love Thy Neighbor initiative, that we are also reaching outside of our doors to help those in need. And this one was developing creative online platforms. Once borders reopen, this is Israel. They'd love to work with the Jewish Agency to turbocharge visits both ways. Because another loss in terms of Israel experiences is that the shlichim, they usually send like young soldiers, like young emissaries into different communities in the United States every summer. It's through the Jewish Agency and the federations in this country, and none of them have been able to, are able to come this year. And different people house them and they visit. We've had them to visit Ohef Sholom as well. And then there's a whole thing about Aliyah. And Israel is a resource. One thing universally acknowledged is the important role Israel has played during the pandemic in fostering a sense of Jewish unity and serving Jewish communities around the world. This is best exemplified by the Jewish Agency with its international infrastructure and presence in more than 40 countries. And the gentleman who wrote this is, I think, from the Jewish Agency. Let's just see here. Yeah, he's David Breakstone. He's like the associate director or something like that. He says the significant number of new people who have been engaged, the increased familiarity with Zoom. Amen to that. I mean, how many of us knew from Zoom before? By the way, I was going to do this before the world caught on fire. I was going to try to do a little bit of a lighter hearted sermon this week. There's a new Yiddish word. I'm going to type it right here. Sorry. Here. It's ausgesummt, which means over Zoom. I am over Zoom. I'm ausgesummt. There, I said it with the right thing. Oh wait, I didn't do this. Ausgesummt. It's not a real word, but it's a word that's been made up now, and the clergy is using it constantly across all the movements. Oi, I'm ausgesummt. Like I'm so over Zoom, you know. Caravans, I like that. Okay. So anyway, Zoom and other connective technology, the sense of togetherness, it was deepened by the isolation and has offered prospects for growth. Liz loves it. Liz loves learning Jewish words, and her Hebrew is unbelievable. I just want you to know, remarkable. That's why, well, for many reasons, but she always is the one that, like, when we do like Friday Night Live, who changes the slides and everything, because she follows the Hebrew, which is pretty remarkable. By the way, Liz is a active member of Christ in St. Luke's, and she sings in, well, she doesn't sing in their choir, she sings in our choir because she likes to worship with her family, but we call her, like Chuck, a Jewiscopalian, but she's a very good Jewiscopalian. So we do love you, Liz. We love you, sweetheart. So not every institution, overcoming the obstacles won't be easy. Not every institution is going to survive. Not every community will fully recover, but there's a reservoir of resilience and determination that portends a brighter tomorrow. Amen to that. That, along with a renewed appreciation for the dictum that all Jews are responsible for one another, an enhanced consciousness of mutual responsibility, and a re-energized commitment to the collective, bears well for the future, and amen. Amen to that. And this is another, Liz is also Queen Esther. Yes, she is. She's Queen Esther. She is. She's wonderful, Queen Esther. This is from Rabbi Jeff Salkin, who has been on our list of scholars in residence to bring to Ohef Sholom for years. But now we can only, because of the economy, we've only been able to afford someone every 2 years. And the last one we did was Rabbi Rick Jacobs for the celebration of the 100th anniversary of the sanctuary in October of 2018, November, I think, of 2018. But anyway, so we're due a new one as soon as we can gather. But anyway, he's written many, many books. Like he wrote the Bar Mitzvah book, Putting God on the Guest List. He writes a lot. So he's writing about, like the rabbis in Yavna, he says we're experiencing a Yavna moment. So Yavna moment was like when the Romans sacked Jerusalem, and they negotiated with Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Was it Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai? It'll come to me in a minute if it wasn't. Anyway, it's the one who codified the Mishnah. If somebody knows, just write it. Anyway, and what he said was, they're like, what do you want? You know, and he said, I want the scholars of Yavna. I want Yavna, which is another city in Israel, and the scholars of Yavna. And what they did, because the temple was destroyed, was totally reinvent Judaism. We went from a sacrificial system. Literally, we commune with God by sacrificing animals multiple times a day. 3 times a day regular, and replaced it with the prayer services. So why did Jews pray 3 times a day? Because we used to offer sacrifices 3 times a day. And why 4 times on Shabbat? Because we had 3 services plus Musaf, the additional service. And why 7 times a day on the high holidays? Because we used to offer 7 sacrifices. And the different prayers correspond to different things with the they completely reinvented Judaism. So he's saying, like the rabbis in Yavna, we are renegotiating where Judaism happens. Just as the loss of Jewish sovereignty moved the sanctity of Jewish practice to the Jewish home, to the Jewish table, the symbolic remnant of the ancient altar, and to the synagogue, the coronavirus crisis has at least temporarily moved Judaism out of the synagogue. We are now in cyber Yavna. Across the United States and beyond, synagogues are temporarily closing, moving their core operations, services, classes to Facebook, Zoom, and other platforms. Many synagogues have done this without missing a beat. Without missing a beat, proving their resilience and with it their relevance. That's the important thing to me. Judaism is temporarily not in the synagogues. Judaism is now in the cloud, which, let the record note, is a biblical euphemism for God. That interesting? Remember, God appeared in a cloud and led the children of Israel on their journey through the wilderness. So it is kind of interesting that he says that the cloud, which is where Judaism is taking place now, is a euphemism for God. It's resulted in an explosion of participation. And then he goes on to talk about all the ways that his temple, exploded. We could do the same for ours. We don't need to do that. But here's the thing, though. The vast majority of our participants were not members of our synagogue, or most likely of any synagogue. For years, we've been engaged in a whole conversation about synagogue membership. What constitutes synagogue membership? Whether member is even the right term. I have colleagues who they don't call it membership, they call it partnership. And you become a partner in the congregation, not a member, just different nomenclature. For years, some have said that we should be counting the number of people who cross our threshold, not the number that pay dues. Perhaps they said we should be counting the number of souls that we touch, not the number of checks we receive. Likewise, for years, I wonder aloud whether our technology is destroying our sense of community or merely reshaping it. The jury might still be out, but they do say that studies have shown, prior to the virus, of course, that live streaming services does not diminish the number of in-person attendance, because people who want to gather, for whom that's important, are going to gather. You know what I mean? When it's safe, of course. But for the last few years, I've been trying to bring more Jews back to the synagogue. This is a test of a way we can do it. Thank you, Marcia. Yes, you have. She's a one-woman recruitment machine. It's amazing. Not the only one, of course, but and you just have to know that Marcia came to me from another synagogue, which shall remain nameless, and she told me about her long history there, and she told me some of the challenges she was having, and I told her, do not leave your synagogue. Do not join Ohef Sholom. You have too much invested there. Your community is too important. The work you're doing there is too important. You can come whenever you want, but don't do it. Well, of course, she didn't listen to me. Why right? and of course, she and her husband, Marty, God bless them, have been very happy at Ohef Sholom. But I really meant it. We're not in the business of taking people from other congregations, but I do think what we have is very special. So it's not surprising to me that people would want to be a part of it and would want to help other people become a part of it as well. Marcia, right, I appreciated the advice, but I don't regret it for a minute. Yes. I'm sure glad to be in the same synagogue as Marcia. Incredible lady. We all are. And I just want you to know, somebody was at a committee meeting last night on Zoom. A committee meeting, okay? A committee meeting is not always the most fun thing to be at, you know what I mean? And the person texted me afterwards to say, I just got out of the such and such committee meeting, and I want to thank you for the beautiful community you've created at Ohef Sholom. I said, well, thank you, but it isn't me, it's all of us, but it certainly is a different place than it might have been maybe 15 years ago, which is when I came, which is a lovely thing, we're making progress. Okay, he says that we've passed the test. We've passed the test of adaptation. And in so doing, we're redefining Jewish people. Last Shabbat, I looked carefully at the names and locations of our Facebook flock. Many were Gentiles, Christian, Muslims, a few Buddhists from South Korea, even several Sikhs. It turns out there's an international and interreligious market for Judaism, a Judaism without defensiveness or apology, the real deal as we teach it. What I learned was that unlike synagogues and classrooms, which have doors and walls, the cyber shul does not. Judaism just became more relevant than we could have ever imagined, and to more people. The paradox of the destruction of the temple, that was in the year 200 or in the year 70, is that Judaism survived and thrived. Could the paradox of the pandemic be that Judaism is now surviving and thriving in ways that we could have only dimly imagined as little as 3 weeks ago? This pandemic will pass. Yes, Ellen said that. This pandemic will pass. The question is, on the day after, what will Judaism look like? It might well be that we've discovered the new Jewish normal. Maybe so. Okay. This is a list. That article was written on April 7th, so it's been 2 months. But this is, yes, Joyce is saying she and Nate have never belonged to a synagogue where they felt like home like this. I've heard that from lots of people. I can say the Tituses feel that way too. I happen to know that. Because after 53 years, we welcomed David into the covenant of our people, and he could have done it probably 50 years before, but they wanted to be at Sholom. So we're grateful to all of you. Okay, our economic system will become more equitable. Wouldn't that be nice? There is hope that we might begin to see the world differently. Maybe we can view our problems as shared, and society is more than just a mass of individuals competing against each other for wealth and standing. Maybe, in short, we can understand that the logic of the market should not dominate as many spheres of human existence as we currently allow it to. This is one of those underpinnings of racism also, the social inequity. This is important. And, you know, if we are to see some systemic changes, this will have to be one of the things that happens. I'm not advocating for socialism, but there will have to be more equity in our system, because anytime we have an underclass, we're all pulled down. There's no way to get around it. You know, for people to tell me that in Ghent we're safe, but on the other side of the railroad tracks in Park Place we're not, is ridiculous. It's a block difference. You know, it's one block. I mean, it's just, you know, that it just isn't real. We're deluding ourselves. So I really do believe that, you know, it's in the Christian Bible, not the Hebrew Bible, that says, you know, we will be judged by how we treat the least of us, you know, those who are the most vulnerable. Judaism has other teachings like that, very much so, about being open-hearted and open-handed and treating all people with dignity, but that particular phrasing is not from us. Education will move online. Okay, I'm going to skip past the ones that I don't think we really need to talk. Previous crises have led to major political changes. The Social Security check that arrives each month, the unemployment benefits that help tide workers over between jobs, the security lines snaking through airports back when millions of Americans were still flying. They are so deeply embedded in today's society that we take them for granted. All were the products of crises like the COVID-19 pandemic. He took quotes from, you know, when he saw a quote that he thought was relevant over a long period of time, he put them in this list. So, but I do think this is a very good list. I don't know when Social Security, I don't know if it was part of FDR's New Deal. I'm not 100% with Social Security, but we certainly know that the security lines in airports is after 9/11. Yes, Elizabeth is saying yes. Would slavery have ended without a civil war? I doubt it. I doubt it. I think you're right, Sandy. I don't think it would have, because it required economic and political changes that people in power were not willing to make. Would women be voting? It's another good question. Working from home will become much more mainstream. That's a good one. That would certainly help with the carbon footprint, right? If you don't have to commute. But of course, that takes away from the gathering and the social interaction. So everything has different, you know, goods and bads. The service industry may never recover. This makes me sad. The pandemic is sure to mark the way people work, shop, socialize, perhaps permanently shifting the way many service industries operate. Sandy says we have meatless Mondays. How about driverless Tuesdays? Good. Social Security, President Roosevelt, August of 1935. Manufacturing will return to the US. That could be because one of the things that's listed here later is that we have assumed that all of the components that are necessary to create certain things that are manufactured all over the world can be readily brought together at any time to make that happen. And what the virus has shown us is sometimes that very interdependence makes, shuts everything down as well. When you are taking in goods and services from other countries because of trying to ward off a pandemic. Fear of infection will linger long after the virus has been contained. I think that's probably true. People will be afraid, although it's shocking to me how many people you see outside not wearing masks. And yeah, there goes the salad bars. Yes, Sandy, there goes the salad bars. That's probably true. They showed pictures like on Memorial Day at the beach and all that. I can understand wearing a mask at a beach would be hard, but it's not like anyone was social distancing. They were on top of each other. So anyway, the way the world economy functions will undergo fundamental change. This is what I was just talking about. Businesses will be forced to rethink their global value chains. These chains were shaped to maximize efficiency and profits. And while just-in-time manufacturing may be the optimal way of producing a highly complex item such as a car, the disadvantages of a system that requires all of its elements to work like clockwork have now been exposed, right? You can't get, when you go to this, some of the predictions that of change are overstated, God willing, right? Americans will never stop going to basketball games. They won't stop going on vacation. They'll meet to do business. No decentralizing technology so far, not telegrams, not telephones, not television, and not the internet has denated, I don't even know what that means, has denated that human desire. I think it's like has changed that human desire to shake hands despite technologists' predictions to the contrary, meaning the human impulse to gather and to connect and to be together, right, for companionship in any way is never going to be completely overtaken by technology. It's just not going to happen. Marcia says this is our Noah's Ark and the flood. Jane says maybe intergenerational families may begin to live more in proximity. Elizabeth says thank you for what I put into making these happen. You are most welcome, darling. You are most welcome. The pandemic, political stability in the developing world will collapse. Fragile states will be pushed into chaos and anarchy. Some won't survive COVID-19, and massive dissidence toward the end of mass mortality will bring hundreds of thousands to the streets to overthrow regimes whose legitimacy will be undermined by their inability to manage the crisis. Fascinating, this is from Al Jazeera. So they may be talking about the Middle East. Many of those countries are fragile to begin with. I mean, they tried to overthrow the dictatorships and make them more democratic, but some of them became even more radicalized. So it's, I don't know. It always makes me nervous, like the destabilization of the Middle East. Like it always makes me nervous, more so than the destabilization of any place else. Like the Middle East, somehow the destabilization there, it's always terrifying to me because there are I really believe the few who are so bent on literally like destruction of the world. Like it's so terrifying. It's just the few, but they make it for everybody bad. The pandemic creates opportunity to address climate change. Amen to that. We better be doing this. I hate to tell you guys, we are the next city on the list to get a massive destructive hurricane. We're the only one of the top 5 areas that have been pinpointing that hasn't had one. All the other 5 have had it. We're the only one. And sea level rise, we're completely surrounded by water. This is going to be very different and challenging decade for your young grandchildren as they move through childhood and adolescence, climate change, racism, education. I totally agree, Jane. I totally agree. Telehealth is here to stay. I hope so. I like telehealth. I really do. You know, you just sit, you talk to the, you know, I mean, some things you have to do in person is they have to run tests. You know, you can't put a stethoscope through the screen, but, you know, they can certainly talk to you that way. Technological platforms have been launched, providers trained, patients educated, appointments converted to video visits. I mean, just sort of raise your hand if you've done telemedicine appointments, anybody in this time. I mean, every time I have an appointment, they call and say they're moving it anyway, either to telemedicine or to like a month forward. Even my oncologist. Gail raises hand. Yes, Gail. Can we unmute Gail? Claire raises hand. Okay. So Gail, you go first. Where's our Gail? Abby raises hand. Okay. Gail, Claire,
You said raise your hand with the telehealth, and it's been great for
us.
Oh,
yes, telehealth, yes.
It's been great for us. Tom has so many appointments he has to go to. When we can do some virtually, it is a godsend.
It is a godsend. It is. It's the same with Marty. I mean, getting him out of the house and ready and gone, and it's very, very difficult. So doing telehealth is good. Many people here have done telehealth, and it was great. Raised hand for telehealth. Yes. Okay. Here's a negative impact. Authoritarianism will rise. Well, of course, you know, if revolutions, you know, if popular revolutions rise, so will authoritarianism, because they got to stamp down on that. Progressive political ideas will be more accessible. We will exit this pandemic with a new understanding of how both our government and society work. Formerly fringe ideas on the left, like universal basic income or healthcare, are now household terms. Well, we can only hope, right? People will begin to flee major urban cities because if you can work from home, the appeal of living in these big city centers is, you know, isn't as great. And they say, you know, new villages will rise in prominence while traditional commuter belts fade away. I mean, that could be nice, you know. The pandemic will lead to popular political revolution, like Occupy Wall Street 2.0, but this time much more massive and angrier. Well, I think Kathy O'Neill of Politico gets the gold star for predicting like the most imminent change, because here it is, you know, 8 weeks after this article was published. This, I think I said, was from April 7th. And look, we do have a popular political revolution, more massive and angrier than before. And then there's this person from Mother Jones, Kevin Drum, who said nothing's going to change. I don't think anything will change forever, and I wish people would stop saying so based on 2 whole weeks of practicing isolation and social distancing. So obviously, you know, what is to happen is yet to be seen. I just wanted to say 2 closing things. One is that I will schedule another series. It won't be 7, but maybe 3 or 4 for right after the high holidays. Because believe it or not, it's going to take Canner and I like 3 months with Chuck, and we're, you know, it's a lot to manage to put the holidays together, because they're going to have to be in some way produced. So we will be working on that. But right afterward, and so I think that will be a good time, because first of all, we'll have a lot more information and a lot more time to see what's transpired. And also it'll overlap the elections in November. So that's one thing. The other thing is, tomorrow night in my sermon, I'm going to announce, like, I don't want to call it a book club, but I'm going to suggest 3 books that I'd like us to read together about white privilege and how to be an anti-racist, etc. And I'd like to meet once a month in June, at the end of June, maybe the end of July, the end of August, to discuss each book and what we can do as a community. And I think that will give us enough time, you know what I mean? And I'll figure it out and announce it. I haven't thought about it enough to really formulate, and to pick 3 out of the, I don't even know how many books. I don't know, you know. So anyway, so that is my closing remarks. Thank you all for hanging in there with me all these 7 weeks. And for those who've hopped in and out, some of you have written me questions that I am more than happy to answer. I did, as I said many times, have 4 funerals last week, so I'm a little behind on responding to emails, but I will get there. So I am sending my love to all of you. I look forward